Welcome back to our Beg to Differ. My name is Yusuf Ismail, and with me in the studio is Rasul Snyman and Xolisi Kaunda. And we're also joined from the PAC live from Cape Town, Sabelo Sibanda. Welcome back, all three of you. Xolisi, I just want to get, you've heard the response both from Rasul and Sabelo, is that in actual fact, and I don't want to detract too much from the kind of core thrust of our issues surrounding the Khoisan, but obviously as these are ancillary issues, that obviously link to this principal core issue, is that the reality is that after 1994, post-1994, you have seen the creation of a new black middle class, and in fact the chasm of poverty that existed even the heights of apartheid has been far accentuated over the past 25 years than has ever been. You've had you talk about the National Development Plan, you speak about foreign investment. By and large, the ANC, which in principle spoke out during its liberation struggle as a socialist enterprise, in fact has jumped onto the bandwagon of this neoliberal capitalism, increasing our debt at a number of levels. There's open corruption we've certainly spoke about, that's endemic on a weekly basis, you see in the national newspapers. But more particularly, the fact that it has bought into this neoliberal capitalist enterprise, which in fact, in many respects, rather, is a total failure of what it promised the people prior to the advent of democracy in 1994.
Firstly, we should acknowledge that since our democratic breakthrough, there are laws that we have repealed. You know that when you talk about segregation, how people have been allocated the space within their own country. The majority of our people have been locked out of the mainstream economy, which we still experience some challenges. Yeah, but the interventions that we said we have made, because we need to address socio-economic issues of our people. Millions of our people today, they've got access to clean, potable water. Millions of our people have access to housing. Millions of our people have access to electricity. I mean, so these are the things that we should be raising.
There's so many issues I have to basically point out to. Are you saying that these solutions can be reached by adopting a neoliberal capitalist enterprise?
No.
Because you've embraced, the ANC is a pro-capitalist entity. And you speak about millions of people having access to water. I stay in the rural areas. I basically work in the rural communities. People do not have access to water. The municipalities are totally corrupt. There's theft that's happening. You speak about housing. There's contracts that are basically being given to individuals who are receiving large amounts of money from municipalities at provincial level, at national level, for substandard accommodation. The reality doesn't actually play out to what you're actually saying.
Ours is a mixed economy. And secondly, we aspire to become a developmental state. So therefore, the state is now intervening on the matters, including the economic issues of this country. Hence, you see the president leading.
In what way? In what way? By getting Chinese foreign investors?
Firstly, what we are intervening on is to broaden the participation in the economy. How do we do that? We talk about the ownership of wealth in the country, that through our SCM processes, our procurement processes and systems, we should now turn the things around so that people, they start benefiting. And we are not talking about things which are not happening. We are talking about the transformation that you can see in other public entities like Transnet. When you talk about opportunities that have been availed to the people, the departments themselves, through our discretionary spend in the government of South Africa, the processes are already unfolding. But we are acknowledging the fact that the issue of corruption is there. And in our acknowledging that, there are steps, fundamental steps that this government is making. But all what is problematic in our country is that these things are not communicated. Even when people are arrested, you find the little articles on the newspapers and in other media houses. But when corruption is done, you find the big first pages and all of that. So we are saying we need to move forward.
I think I beg to differ.
Sure.
I beg to really, really differ. The first thing, there are a couple of points that are being raised that are really, the fruits are not showing these points. Political rhetoric is political rhetoric. Everybody has an excuse, and the ANC has an excuse. In fact, it has a long list of excuses. When we say unity, for example, what are we talking about? We've had Sihle Zigalala saying that Indians and colored Khoisan people should not be part of the economy.
He made that claim just a few weeks back.
What did the ANC do?
Nothing, no reprimand.
In the Western Cape, for example, an ANC member said colored people are like dogs. What did the ANC do?
Nothing.
The other point is the ANC has labeled us almost kafirs, so to speak. Because
when you say label you as kafirs, you're using the K, label who?
The Khoisan people. For example, there's no such thing as a colored. The ANC had the audacity to label the Khoisan people as colored and still maintains that label up till today. That is a blatant sign of their own racism, for example. That's only one. There's Sihle Zigalala, that's two. Let's take another concept where we say tribalism. Let's go to tribalism. I live in KZN, KwaZulu. KwaZulu. Where's Kwapedi, for example? So the ANC has gotten into the race paradigm. It has not left the race paradigm at all. It's even gotten into the tribal paradigm, and that will go into land as well. For example, we got Ingonyama Trust. Where are the other people getting their land from? Where's the Ikoisan Trust, for example?
It doesn't exist at all.
Ipedi Trust. So the ANC is pandering and perpetuating and entrenching racism.
I mean, at the Ingonyama Trust is solely monarchy
Can I just
control.
come in on that
Yes,
point?
sure, come in, Sabelo.
Yeah, I'd like to come in on the point that Rasul is making now, more particularly this aspect of labeling. The PAC is very clear in its articulation of the position as regards the fact that at the end of the day, there is one race, which is the human race. And let's look at this whole concept of colored and the situation as regards the ANC. In the 60s, there was what was called the Colored People's Congress, which decided to dissolve and basically work within the context and the confines of the liberation movement at the time, of which mainly it was ANC and PAC. ANC rejected any relationship with so-called colored people, and the PAC said there is no way we can refuse to work with fellow Africans because we do not recognize this label of colored. And in 1993, there was a debate here in Cape Town where the issue of colored was again tabled, and PAC ended up walking out on those discussions when ANC was continually insisting that the Khoi and the San must be labeled as colored. And the argument of the PAC being that by so doing, you are denying the Khoi and the San their rightful heritage, you are denying their rightful identity, you are denying them the right to be who they are as African people.
Before we go for break, I just want to bring in Xolisi on this point, Sabelo. I just want to bring in Xolisi that it is a fact that during the heights of apartheid, the Khoisan were in fact forced to register as colored. That's an established fact. And so the issue of colored registration and identity is problematic to us. But after 1994, the ANC continued with that. There was no change. And I think the point being made by Sabelo is that the ANC simply continued in perpetuating the same stereotypes that the apartheid government did, which was obviously continued under this new elitist establishment that came to power.
We as ANC government, we have a very open door policy.
No, but firstly, open door, but do you recognize
firstly, we acknowledge people who are South Africans, and we also acknowledge that there are platforms which are now created by the president to engage with Khoisan community. So that they are able to raise their concerns and the government is able to act decisively to address the concerns
what has been done over the past decade, forget 20 years, over the past decade, you say there's an open book policy that has been done. What has been done? Give us something that has been done over the past decade. Can you point us to a particular trajectory in terms of these are the reformations, these are the reforms this is what has been done in relation to this particular community. It's in fact dying out to a large extent.
The statue has just been unveiled in Kokstad municipality. It's a sign of an indication of the positive response by the government. Because that is ANC-led government, and we are opening our hands to say this South Africa belongs to all who live in it.
Therefore,
that's a fundamental
principle. Let's deal with this properly in context. Rhodes also had a statue here. If you go down to the center at the City Hall, there's a statue of the Queen who colonized us. Now, how are we going to put new statues while keeping the old? It shows that we want to keep the same narrative as much as we can, and we'll do a bit of cosmetic change. Let me go to one point.
Can we just come back? I have to stop you. We have to go for a quick ad break because we need to pay our bills. We'll be back shortly. Welcome back to I Beg to Differ. Joining me in the studios are Rasul Snyman, Lolisi Kaunda, and Sabelo from Cape Town via Skype. So just basically before you came back, you were making quite an important point, which I would like Lolisi to address. This whole issue about the narrative, the narratology still remaining the same. You find these statues that are basically in existence, and the fact that there's a lack of recognition on the part of the ANC in recognizing dispossession of this particular, because at one level, and you know there's so many issues and ambit surrounding this, but at one level the Khoisan, besides being dispossessed by the colonials, were also dispossessed by the Nguni tribe, by other black people, which has not been recognized as well.
I think there has to be a rewriting of the narrative. The Khoisan need to tell their own stories, because we had the colonialists telling our stories. Now we had the ANC telling us their story, but no one's listening to our story. For example, we don't even have a language in the 11 official languages. And I find it strange that 24 years later, we're still on this journey and we haven't been given our languages.
So the Khoisan identity was further undermined in the struggle for official recognition by the ANC government.
By default, there are two ways the ANC government oppressed us, and I'd say continue to oppress us, because we're still struggling. Why are we struggling 24 years later? We should have been liberated in 1994. If the liberation was complete, if the liberation was comprehensive, if the liberation wasn't a liberation of the elite, it was a liberation of the people. Now, when we come to people like Sihle Zigalala saying that the colored and the Khoisan should not be in the economy, I find it very problematic.
What's the rationale behind that? Because I want to bring in, why did he say that?
Firstly, let's identify the key issues which must be responded to.
No, but I
because the perspective that is presented...
The point that Rasul has raised on Sihle Zigalala is quite a damning issue. And I want you to, I know you can't obviously speak for him, but it's something which he mentioned, which he needs to basically be held to account.
Yes, it's a distortion of facts.
Did he state that the Khoisan and the colored, something along the line, so I don't want to paraphrase what he said, what he actually said.
The essence, one has to look at, I don't like looking at the periphery. I like to go to the heart of something. The essence of what he said was that Indians and colored people should not get tenders over 50 million rand. Now, when we begin to add this kind of discrimination, it has two components.
It's a racial
it has
rhetoric.
A race
it's a racist rhetoric.
And a class. There are two things. Now, when we talk about an equal society in one breath, and then we talk inequality in another bit, it's hypocrisy of the worst kind.
So I just want to bring in, Polisi, was it a racist rhetoric by Sihle Zigalala?
When we talk about economic beneficiation, we must clarify our position. When we talk about economic beneficiation...
I will come to you shortly, sir. I will come to you, Sabela.
In our country, we say that blacks in general and Africans in particular. So therefore, the blacks we are talking about, it involves Africans, it involves coloreds, it involves Asians, and as well as the element of the Chinese. So therefore, when you talk about the broader beneficiation,
I understand the point.
That's a government position.
But I understand the point, but in reference to tenders, he was making a clear distinction there. He was making a clear distinction, a demarcation between coloreds and Indians, or certainly other non-African in one level, who he viewed them separately to Africans, or probably to Zulus or to Xhosas. There was a clear distinction made by him in relation, and I think for someone of his caliber, it's extremely irresponsible, certainly with the race crisis that we certainly face at this point.
I think he was misquoted. Because
what was his actual
the clear perspective is that let's go to our legislations in South Africa. What becomes the definition of blacks? So that's what he was saying.
What's the definition of who is a black man?
the blacks with the current laws, it refers to Africans, it refers to coloreds, it refers to Asians, as well as the inclusion of the Chinese. So when we talk about black,
yes,
and say there are categories, because we need to uplift people who have been locked out of the mainstream economy. And for us to do that is to give them opportunities. So therefore, it can't be possible that they are locked out of the beneficiation.
Have the colors not even excluded? Have they not been
They are
excluded?
included. That's what I'm saying.
No, but so
I'm saying when he was quoted, that means he was misquoted.
So what was the actual quote? What was the actual quote?
The call that
what was his call? What was the call he was making?
The call we are making as ANC
government.
The call we are making, he represents the ANC.
He represents the ANC.
He speaks on behalf of the ANC.
Certainly.
Now, as a provincial executive member, I'm giving you what did he mean about the transformation of our economy. So the beneficiation of blacks include Africans, coloreds, Asians, and Chinese.
Okay, let us respond to that.
That's a clear definition. But in broadening the participation in the country's economy, we are saying through our interventions, so these categories that were left out of the beneficiation, they should now be assessing and seizing those opportunities.
I think Sabelo wants to speak.
You want to speak? You've been wanting to speak for some time. You've heard what he says. He speaks about, I don't know whether we're banding around with words. He speaks about the beneficiation of blacks, and certainly, as I understand it, different categories of blacks.
Yes.
And obviously, I would assume dependent on the level of disadvantage that they experienced in the height of apartheid. I mean, you've heard what Rasool stated, particularly in relation to the comments by Sishle. Is something you want to respond to?
Look, the confusion that bedevils the ANC continually manifests itself whenever they try to explain their positions on anything. And that is what happened where you get into power and you don't have an ideological position that informs the direction of your party or your structures. Because look, on one hand, you will hear the ANC articulating a position which was stated by the PAC, by Mangaliso Robert Sobukwe, the first president of the PAC, of a non-racial society. And ANC will also now pick up on those words and talk about a non-racial society, but we hear now Mxolisi trying to explain that there is a classification, which classification is premised upon the same racial prescripts that put us where we are, to a point where now he's trying to even look at his conceptualization of black and say there's this kind of black and that kind of black and black and black, and therefore muddling up the whole situation. Is ANC talking about a non-racial society, or are they talking about a multiplicity of races that they're trying to put together into the so-called Rainbow Nation? Because all that happened is that 94 created a Rainbow Nation which is made up of different so-called races, whereas we are saying we're looking at a non-racial society. We're looking at a non-racial entity called humanity. So for as long as these issues are not clarified, ANC will continue to confuse itself and confuse the people. And it was interesting earlier to hear Mxolisi talking about how ANC is giving people houses and how they are addressing socio-economic issues, whilst they are talking about upgrading of shacks and call that development. How do you upgrade a shack? And how do you hold on to so much land? According to the statistics, government is holding on to a lot of land. thousands and thousands of hectares of land that is in government hands, and yet at the same time, they are talking about addressing issues of housing and talk about upgrading shacks, and they're not even talking.
Sabelo, I just want to bring in. I just want to bring in policy shortly. I'm going to come back to you.
Which basically compromises the workers. You look at the situation in Marikana and mine workers in general. You look at insourcing and labor brokering. ANC supports all that stuff instead of legislating in such a manner that the workers are protected. And workers actually earn their share.
Sabelo, just one quick point. Sabelo, Policy, just to be, he's raised a number of issues, and certainly what he points out is the hypocrisy that underpins the present leadership of the ANC. That it's very much of a question which the academic Patrick Bond spoke about, talking less and in fact walking.
Sorry, Yusuf, sorry. It's not just the present leadership that is basically contradictory in its articulations and approach. From 1994 right up to now, and even pre-94, there's been so much contradiction and confusion that the ANC keeps on espousing to the nation.
Yeah. Okay, so but policy, just address that, because it seems to be that your organization, gives off the kind of schizophrenic tendencies at a number of levels, and the problem I find, not just in terms of identification, but before we come back to that, I have to go out for a quick short ad break as my producer motions me, and we'll be back shortly. Welcome back to I Beg to Differ, and I'm your host, Yusuf Ismail. And we are involved in this hearty debate, not just on the Khoisan and land expropriation, but a number of ancillary issues. Policy, just before we and I had to stop you for our ad break, is that it seems that Sabelo has raised a number of issues, and so has Rasul, of this kind of underlying problems which are symptomatic of a far larger problem, in terms of which that at a fundamental level there's something rotten within the ANC, at its core level, what it stands for, what it represents, in terms of how I don't want to kind of belabor on the point and the contradictions made by Sishile Zikalala in terms of what he meant, but on a number of issues here, you speak about land for the people, you speak about free healthcare, you speak about water, you speak about development that is basically, on all these levels, it can be shown the ANC has failed. Now, why is it that politicians simply come with this rhetoric constantly portraying the idea that solutions are being met and the destination is in fact being reached, when the opposite is in fact the reality?
Ideologically, there's no confusion.
But ideologically, there has been a change. I mean,
can I be allowed to respond?
No, I will. Sir.
Can I just
but I don't want you to run on the issue. I don't want you to run.
Stop me when I'm responding.
Sure, okay, go ahead.
Because I'm responding to what Sabelo has said.
Okay, go ahead.
So I'm saying ideologically, the ANC is very clear. We seek to create a united, non-racial, non-sexist, a democratic and a prosperous society.
In principle. So in principle.
No, that's what we stand for. It's a strategic objective. Is the strategic objective of the ANC. Can you allow me space to respond? So the reason why we are now categorizing these sectors which have been locked out of the mainstream economy. When you look at the South African economy as it stands today, the major beneficiaries of this economy still remain the same. White males in South Africa. So therefore, to respond to that particular aspiration of the South Africans, so you've got to intervene as a state and bring about policies that will change and turn around that situation. And for us, in doing that, we are happy. Firstly, we are happy that the middle strata is growing in South Africa, because that's an evidence that the interventions by ANC government, people now, even when you go to rural areas, people are building bigger houses because they've got access to opportunities. And what makes us happy is that the youth of South Africa is becoming more and more involved in the middle strata that we are talking about. So therefore, it tells you that the fundamental principles on transforming the economy of the country is starting to yield positive results. But we still have challenges. And those challenges, because I must respond to what he said.
We've got to respond him as well.
I will get back to you. The last point you make.
Right,
So just
because,
quick point that you made.
Like I say,
he says that there's been change in the rule. I mean, I see the accentuation of poverty.
The other day, I was standing. I also work in rural communities. I was standing at a tavern, and a granny came up to the tavern, at the tuck shop, and said, "Give me 2 eggs." I'd never in my life seen someone buy 2 eggs. And I asked her, "Ma, who are you buying these eggs for?" She said, "For my family." I said, "How many of you?" She said, 4 of us. 4 people are going to eat 2 eggs, and this is the result of our freedom, for example. This is the result of our economic development. Now, let's balance things out. We say there are these nice big houses in the rural areas. Let's go down and look at the poverty in the rural areas and then measure the two. We're given an artificial measure that is given by the ANC. Compared to what?
So that's the point. I mean, Kolisi, just quickly, is that there's this creation of the new black middle class, but the chasm between the upper elite blacks, the middle class, and the lower economic strata has been expanded to a proportion never before seen. Poverty is at its highest now in South Africa than ever it was during the heights of apartheid. Infant mortality amongst black people and black children is the highest now than it was ever during the heights of apartheid. The actual population of black people increased, strangely enough, during this evil period of apartheid, increased in proportion, and over the past 24 years, you find a decrease in the population of black people due to a number of factors: poverty, poor health care, starvation. Now, when you look at the reality, it's good to speak, as you've basically spoken about, big houses in the rural area. But again, I must bring you back. The reality is the complete opposite.
I beg to differ with a narration which says that in South Africa there's no difference since 1994.
I will get back to you.
I beg to differ with the narration which suggests that in South Africa, since the ANC ascendance to the position of power in 1994, there's no change, especially to the poor of this country. There is a change. But poverty is still there. Because
but there are more poor people now than there were pre-1994.
The reason why we still experience that, firstly, globally, the economy does not give us the growth that we envisage. In South Africa, we are not achieving the growth that we envisage. So now, that's why the interventions by the state is to ensure that, firstly, the inclusive growth is emphasized on. Secondly, we also wish to table this to the nation, that the economical background that we inherited in our past, our bitter past, these are the roots. The things that we are talking about here, those are the roots. So these interventions are now aiming at addressing exactly that. And the increase on the number of black students who now have access to universities, there's an indication that there is a clear plan by government to turn around the situation. We invest monies. When you look at how the government is spending its own budget when it comes to infrastructure, I'm also the MEC for transport in KwaZulu-Natal.
You've heard the speech. I mean, the speech by
we are spending more than 60% in rural areas.
No, you've heard the speech by the Minister of Finance.
Exactly.
Extremely bleak picture that was painted. You have read. I take it you've heard the speech,
yes,
and you've read the speech.
Yes.
And despite the bleak picture that was painted and the indebtedness that South Africa is faced with, you still believe that there is a way out and that South Africa is basically on the right track?
Yes, we do. In fact, that part of speech brought about hopes to South Africans.
Well, what hopes?
That the government is now intervening through changing the economic ownership of our economy in the country. The wealth.
But how? I mean,
secondly,
I have to interrupt.
Secondly, the very same.
It's one thing. How is that happening?
The how part. When I come to the how part is when you close me.
No.
Because I wanted to come to the how part.
No, I want you to give me that response. Yes. How?
But short.
I'm saying
short.
We are increasing the capacity of our municipalities. We know they still have challenges. Hence, national departments are intervening to assist them to deliver
When you
services.
say challenges, what do you mean?
Challenges of delivering on the infrastructure.
So lack of service delivery by the municipalities.
Yes, which affects people.
Theft within the municipalities, corruption within
the municipalities. We acknowledge that.
Do you acknowledge that?
We acknowledge that.
And that has been a key
and there's a clear plan
for lack of
and there's a clear plan to root out corruption in South Africa. That clear plan is that people who commit themselves in the criminal activities here in this country, whether regardless of your affiliation, regardless of the position that you hold, you go to courts of law in this country. Well, so therefore, it's a clear indication that the aspect of our democracy on the accountability and transparency is now finding expression. Because before that, in the previous governments, we did not even know how much was lost. But today, South Africans, they are told, this is so much that has been lost. These are so many people. These are so many people who have stolen those resources. And this is how.
I would like to respond. I would like to respond, but I need to get Sabelo. Sabelo, the argument presented by Mxolisi is that effectively the problems we face are very much by and large due to the legacy of the past. And the corruption that has been identified and the theft and the lack of service delivery, these are all problems that we face, but certainly the ANC is finding its way out. What do you say about that?
Well, it's interesting that you should say that. Definitely there is a relationship between the present and the past, and the major part of that relationship being that ANC simply took over and did things the same way. They didn't seek to change anything. They had no issues about the system. That is why we are still caught up where we are. So he's right. There is a relationship between the past and the present because they continued with the system of the past. But then, you see, we have to, you mentioned a word earlier about the word hypocrisy, about the hypocrisy of the ANC. It's interesting that Mxolisi seems to feel that they are advancing. ANC, before elections, had a slogan which goes something like, together we can do more. And then after elections, it was Vuvuzenzele, which basically means get up and do it for yourself. So together with the people, they did more by getting people to vote for the privileged ones to maintain power and stay in those positions. But now when the people came back to say, okay, let's do more now that you're in power, how do we exercise our power? How do we benefit through this power? They're told, no, get up and do it for yourself. There is a community in Cape Town, a community of farmers who ANC has refused to assist for many, many years and actually refusing to even acknowledge their existence. There is another community just outside Cape Town of emerging farmers, about 100 odd emerging farmers on a piece of land which is more than 750 hectares. And they are being told that the only portion that they can be given for them to farm is 39 hectares. 39 hectares to be shared between 100 emerging farmers. And yet the man is telling us that they are equipping the people and ensuring that they are getting access to the economy. How do you access the economy?
I have to stop you.
Sabelo,
I have to stop you. We have to go for a quick short ad break.
Sure.
And we'll be back shortly.
Yeah.
We'll be back shortly.
Okay.
Okay, Sabelo, just I need to 40 seconds. There's some message that you would need to give out to the viewers out there. We kind of detracted a bit from the trajectory of what we discussed today on the Khoisan, but 40 seconds, last words, anything that you wish to say.
Okay. I think the most important thing to realize here is that the issue of the Khoisan, for as long as it's not properly addressed, this whole concept of unity and peace in this country will never see fruition. And basically the whole issue of the impoverished of this country, who continually live in hell in the colonial jails called townships, will also raise its head all the time together with the land issue.
Olisi, last 40 seconds.
The ANC has to be honest and address that.
Olisi, last 40 seconds.
Firstly, we wish to thank South Africans for giving a necessary support to the ANC resolutions, which was taken last year, December, that we should expropriate land without compensation, and as well effecting an amendment on Section 25. Lastly, we also wish to express our words of gratitude to the South Africans for entrenching a voluntary culture, because when we say vukuzenzele, we are saying government is there, but you should also do something to meet the government so that we are able to change our lives for the better. And to deal with the issues of crime in South Africa, we've got clear plans on the agricultural sector. We are intervening to make it a sector that creates employment.
Last 40 seconds, ANC claims they've got the solutions to the problems of the country.
I think the ANC is the problem, not the solution. Number one, from 1994, that has been self-evident. If we're saying the ANC is the solution, it must deal with land, and we're talking about expropriation, all the land. It must deal with the Khoisan people, give them their full rights and joint governance of the country, because they are the owners of the country. It also, to them, they mustn't move us from one prison cell to the next. But we want restorative justice, and we want to destroy the class structures that they are putting into place.
Well, thank you to all three of you, Rasul Snyman, Lolisi Kaunda, and Sabelo. It's been great to have you. And that's all we have for tonight, folks. Join us next week for more interactive debate. I just want to leave you with the last message by Nelson Mandela, who said that if the ANC does not deliver the goods, the people must do to it what they did to the apartheid regime. My name is Yusuf Ismail. The program you're watching, I beg to differ. And join us next week for more hard-hitting debate. Till next time. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.